Dislocation theory challenges the prevailing assumption that heroin causes heroin addiction. And instead it argues that it's not the drugs causing the addiction, it's the social context. Bruce Alexander, the founder of the dislocation theory of addiction, he shows through historical and anthropological research that addiction as we see it now only appears in certain circumstances when cultures are unraveling. Addiction is not a hazard of being human. It's not a universal, it's socially conditioned. And even today, if you were to look at a map, the rates of addiction around the world, you would see that America is by far the worst place. Life in the first world, life in the developed world is becoming increasingly untenable. So communities are getting weaker, marriage, friendship, parenting, all these things are getting more difficult. And in our attempt to adapt to that, we turn to substances or behaviors to soothe ourselves. Dislocation theory is rooted in the research Alexander did probably 40 years ago. Historically, they were looking at addiction by putting rats in cages individually and giving them almost nothing to do except either press a button and get a hit of morphine, or they could drink it off of a liquid dispenser. And those experiments are such a classic example of what you call bias confirmation, where the researcher is actually setting up the experiment to prove what he already believes. Alexander could see through that, and so he said, what would happen if we put the rat in a different environment, one that was pleasing to the rat, where there's other rats and food and toys to distract itself. And much to everyone's surprise, those rats didn't imbibe in the morphine. Or if they did, they didn't get addicted. Many of our citizens aren't unlike those rats, the ones that are isolated. They're scared, they're lonely, they're fearful for their future, they're bored. Those are the conditions that are plaguing us, that are driving the addiction. And those conditions in turn are caused by all these socioeconomic forces. It's sad, a lot of people don't realize that NAFTA and economic globalization, Ross Perot famously warned,
and you don't care about anything but making money, there will be a giant sucking sound going south.
In the 90s, we started seeing the industrial base of this country get offshored. And this created these black holes all over America, economic black holes, and into those holes stepped the drug trade. People still need to eat. The black market shows up where there used to be a legitimate economy. So that's one of the things that's driving it. Of course, another thing that's driving it is our corporations exist to make profits for their shareholders. They have no loyalty or allegiance to the communities that they impact. So Purdue Pharma deliberately marketed OxyContin as a non-addictive drug. And furthermore, they marketed it in parts of the country that were already suffering economic dislocation. So they're deliberately marketing a pain-killing drug to communities that are already in despair. So that causes, just massive addiction overnight. A lot of people still labor under this idea that the current opioid epidemic is due to the activity of criminal cartels from other parts of the world. They're involved, there's no doubt about it, but it got momentum, it got impetus, it got off the ground, this opioid epidemic, from a pharmaceutical company marketing pain meds as non-addictive. The reason dislocation theory is not more well known is because there's no money in it. If we stress that it's a biological problem, then we've opened the door for a pharmaceutical solution. If we say that it's a social problem, then we're forced to look at things like the destruction of American cities and towns due to globalization, or who profits from incarcerating millions and millions of people on drug possession charges. You see, if we look at dislocation theory, we're going to have to really look at much broader social issues that we're not really willing to look at. If we keep it on the level of biology, then some powerful pharmaceutical interests can actually make money off of treatment. Not to mention the prison industrial complex, which makes money off of incarcerating drug addicts. So if I'm laboring under this idea that I'm an addict because I'm psychologically or biologically vulnerable, that's just a polite way of saying I'm defective. if I come to understand that my heroin habit in many ways isn't so different than my father's workaholism or my child's addiction to her cell phone, then I understand that I'm really not different than anyone else. I suffer from the same sort of core malady that is at large in society. What we're doing is unprecedented. We are bringing the 12 steps into the context of dislocation theory, and we're using dislocation theory as a psychoeducational treatment modality. And to our knowledge, this isn't happening anywhere else in the world. You can look at the war on drugs in light of dislocation theory. You could look at the institutional corruption of the pharmaceutical industry in light of dislocation theory. And once the addicts start understanding that, there were powerful social and economic forces that led to their using drugs, they wake up. Addiction has become the rule rather than the exception. Social change needs to happen for this to end.